Hello students, I am Dr. L.K. Das, Assistant Professor of Sociology at the Department of HSS, IIT Roorkee. Welcome to another lecture of the NPTEL course Power and Politics in Contemporary India, a Sociological View. In this course, we have been discussing quite a variety of topics, and up till now we have completed the first 3 weeks. In this fourth week, this entire week we are going to discuss about one topic, but a very significant topic: what is nation and what is nationalism, and how different scholars have tried to understand it. Today we are going to discuss Anthony Smith. Tomorrow we are going to discuss other scholars, both from India as well as from the Western context. Now, Anthony Smith happens to be one of the key scholars who happened in the 20th century and who try to understand what is nation, what is nationalism, and why nation and nationalism are so significant in the modern context. So let us begin. Anthony Smith starts with a paradox. A paradox in the sense that nationalism is both an universal phenomena as well as it is deeply varied. It is also a diversity of types within an overall unity. Now, what does he mean when he is talking about the nationalism as a paradox? Now, Anthony Smith was a student of another great scholar, anthropologist by the name Ernest Gellner, who was one of the first ones who had conceptualized nations and nationalism. But of course, like all good students, Anthony Smith went on to disagree with his supervisor. So, what is he doing here? He argues that nationalism, particularly in the 19th century and in the 20th century, is all across the globe. Unlike previous periods in history, now we have nations and nation states, and they are all built upon the idea or sentiments of nationalism. So, this way, because everybody is deeply impacted by this idea of nationalism, so there is nobody on earth who is not affected by it. While they are affected by it, there is another interesting phenomenon that happens. Nationalism is not just inward looking, it is also outward looking, which essentially means that we as a nation, I might say that I love my country, but I love my country more when there is a war between India and Pakistan. So, nationalism is also about creating an enemy or creating an other, and without that other there would not be a nation, because any nation has a territory. Now, whether this territory is cultural, whether this territory is political, or this territory is geographical is something that we will discuss in subsequent classes. But unlike patriotism, which is very general, nationalism is very specific, it is historically specific, because it brings together nation and the idea of that nation as a self-conscious matter. So, that is the reason why nationalism is both an ideology and a social movement. It unifies people of diverse types, variations, as well as it creates sharp distinctions and exclusions. So, in this class, mostly we are going to it's a more technical class, because we are going to have a discussion on different kinds of nationalism, different theories that have been propagated about it, and from the next class onwards we will get into the certain examples and specify how it is played out. So, according to Smith, we can divide nationalism into two camps. One camp speaks in terms of developmental theories, second non-developmental theories. Now, the development theorists, they would argue that everything is happening because of certain modernization processes, and these modernization processes is because of something called disintegration theory, something called competition theory, and something called communication theory. They are the approaches to understand the developmental theory. Disintegrationist theorists argue that nationalism arises when traditional bonds collapse under industrialization, urbanization, and social economy. Very significant about modernization theories that from the 19th century onwards, every scholar in the West spoke about. Because of modernization or because of industrialization, so many people had to move from the rural areas, those communities broke down, and new forms of societies were created in the urban locations. And because of that, nationalism emerged as a cohesive force. So that, for example, 5 different types of groups who are now inhabiting in this territory. If they are all maintaining their specific identities and living in their own zones, they will end up fighting against each other. But unlike in the previous period, this is also a more complex society, because most of these people, even if ethnically separate, even if linguistically different, they have to go and work in this factory setting. And if they have to work in this factory setting, that means there has to be a clear-cut division of labor to coalesce all of them. Or this could be something else. So, nationalism became a bond which united all these different kind of groups. Secondly, when the Marxists and Leninists would argue that uh, uh, development of nationalism happened because of colonial capitalism and because of class conflict against foreign rulers. At the same time, both Marxists and Leninists would argue that nationalism emerged as a counter to capitalism, or as well as a counter to revolutionary idealism and class struggles. Because if all these groups who are part of this factory are going to think of themselves as one, then any external threat will be a threat to the entire nation, entire community. So, there will not be any class solidarity between these 5 groups. Every time there is a class solidarity, then the idea of nation and nationalism can be brought forward to break this unity. Third is that of the communication theorists, particularly by Deutsch and Lerner, who argued that nationalism is built on literacy, mass media, education, which create shared identities. This is something that we'll discuss more in the next class when we discuss Benedict Anderson and how he uses the idea of literacy, mass media, and education in order to understand the communication aspect of modernization and communication aspect of nationalism and nation. But the idea of Smith is that the developmental theorists have brought forward a certain idea of nation and nationalism, but what he considers their ideas to be, little simple, because it is not possible that primarily because of industrialization or urbanization we are going to have the nation or we are going to have a feeling of nationalism. So what he does, he goes back to the non-developmental theories. Now, non-developmental theories, like developmental theories, again have Marxists, but alongside Marxists, we have the evolutionists, we have the historicists, and others. So, as I discussed there, Marxists and evolutionists argue that nationalism is an obstacle to class-based progress. So, I will not repeat it again. But the historicists, theorists, have a very different idea of nation. Their idea of nation and nationalism comes from the German idealist tradition, wherein they are looking at nation as a natural, organic, and unique community defined by language, history, and customs. It's the spirit of the people seeking expression. Keep this in mind, because in all the classes when you're going to discuss about nationalism, this will become the most important point. So, German idealists say that we are a German nation because we have a natural affinity towards each other, because we speak the same language, we come from the same ethnic stock, we come from the land in which we were called the Germanic tribes. So, that way our nation or our expression of nationalism is very much inherent to what we are or who we are. Also, in terms of non-developmental theorists, we have Elie Kaduri and Acton, who argue that nationalism is artificial and dangerous. Also, because they are witness to what happened in the First World War and Second World War, which most of these thinkers argue is about nationalist goals, is about creating a Lebensraum for yourself, for your language, for your natural growth. Lebensraum is a concept that was very frequently used by somebody like Adolf Hitler. If you're interested, go and check on internet or read more about it to get a clearer picture. So, in essence, his now bringing both the developmental aspect and non-development aspect and unifying them to say that okay, we need to understand nationalism as a unification or union of developmental and non-developmental schemes. Only developmental or only non-developmental cannot explain what is nation and what is nationalism. So, in terms of, again, now that we understood what is nationalism, let us understand what is nation. Now, is nation an ethnic identity, or is it an ethnic group, or it is a statist definition? If it is an ethnicist idea, that means we are again following the German idealist tradition of the descent, culture, language, and history. So, this is primarily cultural or linguistic. If it is a statist definition, that means it is about political loyalty, about citizenship, and about sovereignty. Nationalism here is a devotion to the state. That means I love my country irrespective of what my country does. So, there is no question that anybody can challenge my loyalty to my state. So, when all of it is integrated, that is when a nation is built. Both something that of a decent culture, language, as well as political loyalty. So, for Smith, both of them, like developmental and non-developmental aspects, have to come together for the creation of a nation. So, therefore, if I define now what a nationalism is the aspiration of self-government and sovereignty on behalf of such a group. So there are no paradoxes any longer. A nation is equivalent to the idea of nationalism. It is both ethical as well as it is political. It is both based on language as well as political boundary. Without that, a nation and nationalism cannot exist. So, the aspirations of nationalism would lead us to fraternity and equality among members, unification of diverse groups, and cultural individuality and international prestige. Now, let me go into individual aspects of it. Inside a nation, everybody who is a nationalist are equal members of that nation. Here, nationalism is feeling of togetherness, that yes, we are all one people. That is what is about fraternity. We are Indians, and one of the hallmarks of being Indians is my citizenship, and this citizenship is marked by my right to vote. The day I turn 18, I am eligible to register myself to vote for a certain political party. So, even if I have never voted, but I still have the potential to vote because the constitution of this country gives me that right, and we are all equal members of this fraternity. There are no hierarchies in terms of our nationality, in terms of our citizenship. You can be anybody, you can be everybody, but when you get your passport, on that passport it is written the Republic of India, and you are a citizen of this Republic of India. There are no hierarchies among them. This way, it unifies diverse groups. As I discussed previously, if there are different kind of groups which are residing inside here, nationalism gives them an identity that makes them as part of this group. Without that, it will be now impossible to say that they are all part of a particular identity, particular group. So, it is also about international prestige, because now, as I gave the example of passport, how many countries accept my passport as valid, or what is the stature of this nation or the nation called India amongst its peers in the world forum. So, with my passport, can I go to any country without even requiring a visa, or I can get just visa on arrival? That is also a part of nation building process. So, this way what we witness according to Anthony Smith is that nation and nationalism is not just a singular entity. We have to understand it in all its complexities. When we understand nationalism and nation with all its complexities, that is when we can claim that we know what nation is and what nationalism is. So, nationalism also provides what he calls as grammar of aspiration. So, now this grammar of aspiration is quite significant, because nationalism comes through nationalist movements. Now, nationalist movements could be of different types. One of the types of nationalist movement is an independence movement, or sovereign movements, post and pre-independence movements, so on and so forth. So, very interestingly, what we see here is that Anthony Smith is again making a lot of binaries and lot of distinctions in order to make us understand the complexity of even nationalist movements. For example, let us say in terms of independence movements, he's talking about pre-independence movements, post-independence movements, sovereign movements, as well as in terms of distinctiveness, ethnic versus colonial orientation. You have in sovereign movements, preservation, the renewal, the integration, protectionist, expansionist, colonial, ethnic, mixed. There are so many different types of nationalist movements. So, what we have in India or we had in India, can we call it a colonial nationalist movement or ethnic nationalist movement or irredentist movement or diaspora integrationist movement? Which one can we claim now? So, according to Anthony Smith, in India, the idea of India itself, like that of some other countries, emerged through the colonial period. So, the India that we witness today, or the map of India that we have, administrative map of India that we have, it is a creation of the colonial administrative boundaries. It is not cultural unity. If we had cultural unity, then Nepal would not be a different country, Bhutan would not be a different country, Pakistan would not be a different country, Iran would not be a different country, Afghanistan would not be a different country, Myanmar would not be a different country, or even Sri Lanka would not be a different country, or Maldives would not be a different country. As a matter of fact, even Mauritius would not be a different country. So, the very interesting aspect of it is that the cultural identity that a Kashmiri has and the cultural identity that somebody from Nagaland has, the cultural identity that somebody from uh, Tamil Nadu has, could also be very diverse. So, can we call it that it's not just about the SAARC countries, which can potentially become part of India, but it's also that the different countries, different states and different regional zones that we have in India could also become separate countries. If not for what happened in 1948, when we had unification of India and under the leadership of Vallabhbhai Patel, all the different principalities as well as British India were brought together to create this union called India. So, these are very difficult questions, but significant question here is that the very boundary of India was created by the British Empire, not by us Indians. We accepted it after a lot of reluctance, of course, but we still follow the map that was given to us by them. The second is that of the ethnic nationalism, in which we have ethnic groups like the Kurds, the Basques, which is all about cultural preservation. And in this, you can also add Tibetans, which are now one of the largest groups who do not have a country of their own. Now, Kurds, they live in Syria, Kurds live in Turkey, Kurds live in Iraq, Kurds live in many other places in that entire zone. But because they do not have a country or nation for themselves, so their idea of nationalism is about preserving their culture, the culture which doesn't have a boundary. So, they are dispersed to different nation states, and these different nation states, they are a minority, which makes them the largest minority in the world or largest ethnic group in the world without a separate country. The third and interesting aspect is this irredentist cases, that of Nazi Germany, Somalia and a few others, because what they argued was reuniting with the co-nationals. Now, when you say co-nationals, one argument goes that the very reason Nazi Germany attacked United or USSR is because a great number of Germans were residing in the European side of the Soviet Union, and the Nazi Germany wanted to get all that land which wherever there were Germans, wherever there were German speaking population. The same goes with Somalia, because we have northern Somalia, southern Somalia, and they keep fighting against each other or with each other, so that their co-nationals become part of one single territory. The third is, or the fourth is, that of diaspora nationalism, and Jewish Zionism happens to be one of the key factors here. As a matter of fact, even Kurds who are living in Germany and other places, they are also following something called diaspora nationalism, but doesn't come anywhere close to the Jewish Zionism. Because what they are doing is that the Jews are able to mobilize the historical atrocity or historical atrocities against them as to why they dispersed throughout the world and why they need one nation for themselves. Whether it is Ethiopian Jews, whether it is Mizo Jews, whether it is Indian Jews, whether it is Ashkenazi Jews, or it is any other kind of Jews, they all claim to be one nation, that they are all Jews. And the final one is that of the integrationist project of the nationalism, in which you build cohesiveness among different groups of people to claim that we are all the part of a particular state. We are all Indians now, we are all Tanzanians now, we are all French, we are all Germans, so on and so forth. And this integrationist project, it could be one of the ways through which most of the countries became nation states. So, in essence, if we look at nationalism and modernization discourse, what we see is that although modernization and nationalism, they could be co-constitutive of each other, but both of them have to be historically specific. So, without history, there is no nationalism. There is nothing called, it is timeless in character. It is not timeless. We can identify the decades and the events and the processes through which nationalism emerged, and the routes that it took in order to create for itself whatever it has created for itself. So, intellectuals are very significant, and as we have been discussing, intellectuals are very significant in the construction of an identity. Whether it is in the west, in the east, in the north, in the south, anywhere you go, it is always about the role of intellectuals, because intellectuals can write, and whatever they write, it can be propagated. Just think of a very simple poem like that of Vande Mataram. Vande Mataram was written in Sanskrit in a country where most of the population was illiterate. It was written in a place called Bengal, and through the role of intellectuals, through the role of activists, that idea of Vande Mataram was spread throughout the Indian subcontinent. So, that way the intellectuals with the cultural exuberation of the intellect and practices of imagination are able to create something that is very specific historically, politically and culturally for the specific moment, for the specific movement. So, in the summary, Smith warns against all forms of linear models, whether tradition, modernity. or any of that model. So he is talking about plural path, hybrid traditions and diverse outcomes. And unless and until we look at nationalism, nation building from this non-linear hybrid traditions, we can never ever understand what is nationalism, how it happens, what is its significance, and how it can explain what we have. But this work of Anthony Smith was written in 1969. So one question is, can something that was written in 1969 also be used in 2015 or 16 or in the 21st century? If yes, then how? If not, then how not? But one answer that he himself gives is that his ideas are not timeless. Rather, they are historically contingent, and this contingency needs to be hybrid. You can speak of nationalism, you can speak of nation in any language, but unless and until you are not reducing it to one specific aspect, everything is fine with it. It has to be hybrid. It can never ever be linear. So this is the work that I have been referring to, Theories and Types of Nationalism. This is a classic work. You can go through it, and in examination I'm definitely going to ask questions from this topic. Thank you very much.